Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Sometimes those things we don't notice right away are really probably the most important parts of a film. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more, enlightened in a conversational fashion. If you like how we do things around here, I'm going to assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening right now. Then do us that kindness and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, give us the old 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel, so you can give us a like and subscribe there as well. We'd absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on the social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, we're on the Letterboxd, we're on the TikTok, and God knows we're probably on a few other places. Where else would we be? We're at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates, but finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we like to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please, pay us a visit. On this episode, we got more from The Equalizer 3, which is in theaters now, kicking ass and taking names, with the one and only Denzel bringing the story of Robert McCall to a violent but satisfactory conclusion. It's a good movie. I actually liked it better than the second one. If you're looking for a good action ride, I do recommend you go check it out because, let's face it, Denzel is the man. And when him and Antoine Fuqua, his director, get together, they make magic. They always have, and between you and me, I think they always will. But part of that magic is the team they have around them. And one of those team members is longtime production designer Naomi Shelton, who has worked with director Antoine Fuqua for this is the 7th film, and we just talk a little bit about the nature of production design and finding these locations in Italy and just sort of working to the elements that they have in this fantastic country and fantastic environment to make their surroundings work for them. Because it always feels more real when you're shooting on location rather than trying to recreate something on a soundstage or digitally. It just works better. And Robin, like I said, is a veteran of the industry, and she does a great job not only on this film but on so many other projects that she's worked on. And when she gives us a little insight just to the nature of the job too. And I think we had a good conversation. But before we get too much further, go see The Equalizer 3, which is in theaters as we speak. But first, enjoy our talk with Naomi because, quite frankly, it's a darn good one. All right, well, Naomi, first off, just thank you so much for the time today. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. No, congrats on working on the film. Just because I'm a big fan of the franchise, a big fan of Antoine, but I've got to imagine that transitioning from helping to recreate the worst possible conditions of slavery in the South to Italy is sort of a refreshing change of pace. Like, can you walk me
Yeah,
through, I guess, sort of the early days of production?
I won't lie. We traveled all over southern Italy. The script talked about a little town with a mountain behind it and the sea at its edge. And really, when you get right down to it, it's got to be the Amalfi Coast because it's the only place that fits the description. But leaving no stone unturned, we traveled as far as Puglia, which is spectacular in its own way. So yeah, I saw a lot of Italy in a big enormous rush.
Well, okay, then I guess that leads into my next question. Is it multiple locations, or are you trying to shoot everything in one set? Like, how much extra do you have to sort of add in on something like this, especially when you're in such a beautiful place?
You mean visual effects wise?
Well, not just visually, but even just for like a location standpoint.
Well, the thing in terms of the requirements of the script, there was a big mountain and there was the sea and there was this unbelievably charming intimate town entirely populated by two families only. So didn't have to add anything there. Rome was pretty good looking, and Naples was really good looking and really has this incredible spirit to it. Um, and I have to admit, I haven't seen the finished film, but the thing about Italy is, just point your camera anywhere. It's not, that the challenge for a production designer is more to try to get intimate enough that you make the best possible choices about exactly where are we going to be, because the whole place is so overwhelmingly beautiful and you're just drunk with it the entire time.
I've got to imagine, I mean, especially after years of working with Antoine, just having sort of this location must be sort of a unique treat. How is it, just from, especially on your end, to be able to see sort of a trilogy of things go from one end to another?
I really wanted and continue to want the best for Robert McCall. I want him to live happily ever after, and I'm hoping he'll do it in this little town that we found for him. And the day before we started shooting, I was bustling around the town square with everybody, my team and electric and everybody, blah, 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 working. And Denzel kind of came strolling up with a couple of people, and he was beaming. He was so happy. And he sat down in a little corner of the square in front of the barber shop. The mandolin playing barber was there. And he sat down in front of the barber shop and he kind of looked around and just sat back and he just looked so happy. So we had a really nice conversation that way. I was really happy to see him, and I was really happy to see him take the place in and feel so good about it. So what was the question?
Well, just in terms of like because
the franchise, the going from
because in your job,
I mean,
go ahead.
who wouldn't want to end up in Italy? I mean, I kind of started thinking about it being not started. I mean, it's pretty nice. I hope he lives happily ever after in this little town. Yeah.
Because it's just one of those things. It fascinates me because you've had the chance to work with Antoine so much, and you, especially on this Equalizer trilogy, you get to see sort of an evolution of a character in your job, in your position. I can imagine in many instances you kind of just have to treat it as a job and then sort of move on. It definitely feels like, because you've worked with Antoine for so long, there is a bit more of a relationship there, and you're a bit more emotionally invested, if that's a correct way to put it.
I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I love Antoine. Genuinely love Antoine. He's a wonderful director and a good friend. And he and I, like pretty much everybody, have a pretty big interest in the dark side. We both have a visceral connection with that. As does McCall, as I possibly does Denzel, but I really wouldn't know about that. And this particular this particular Equalizer, the character is coming from such a terrible place. I mean, his friends have betrayed him. They've killed his best friend. His wife is dead. I mean, he's just like in the deepest, darkest place a person can be in. He's just continued killing kind of robotically, we think, until this moment when he comes here and something seems like it might change. He's still got the job to do, but something in him seems like it's going to change, and that's a good thing. And that feels lovely and fresh. And as we're all like getting older along with the franchise, that's a very hopeful note.
No, absolutely. And I mean, it's such a rare thing to see, especially in an action franchise like this, which definitely has its violent moments. And I mean, I got to see the film yesterday, and I mean, in watching it, the two words that kept coming to my mind were beauty and brutality. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, when you're putting together something like this, I can imagine it's a bit I'm looking for the right word. I don't want to say challenge, but like you really have to sort of create a dichotomy of, on one end, have this beautiful scenery, have this town, the ocean, the mountain, but then in the dark corners, you have to have something sort of be completely splattered with blood and have somebody with an axe in his head.
Well, I have to say that on the two previous Equalizers, I did really relish thinking about the splatter and like thinking about, okay, what's the blood going to be on? In this movie, I think the blood was going to be on everything anyway. And my attention was more on let's make sure that Italy is present and we are really feeling this different place because this is going to make a difference to this character's life ultimately, and it's transformative. And I was interested that we do, soak it in beauty, but not just sort of the sort of elevated high-end beauty, but also the beauty of the lives of normal people, because their homes are gorgeous. I mean, that like the doctor's home is modeled very closely on a house that we found in this little town, Atrani, owned by a family that's been there for generations, as are all of these houses, being that it's a town of two families, two very expanded families, with these amazing tiles and the orchids that they've been growing for like 100 years and they come back every year, and just all these little tiny details that in every movie that's really character driven, the opportunity to explore an environment and find these little details and be surprised and amazed and illuminated by them. I wanted to put all of that in the movie, and I wanted the place to be really felt.
Well, it felt like McCall opened the door and finally saw the world in color, if that makes any sense,
That's what the writer wrote too. So that's
really
great.
okay.
That's like absolutely amazing. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm curious, when you're working in this gorgeous place, is it easier to add the splatter, or is it easier to sort of be somewhere severe and add a little bit of joy to it?
Well, if I had my druthers, I'd rather be in this place. So, yeah. Although I have to say, I just love the whatever the Home Depot-ish place from the first one. That was a blast. We had a really good time with that.
I can imagine that was a fun one to shoot in. Yeah.
It was. I mean, there were just so many things that can become, violent tools, Home Depot, as I'm sure you've noticed when you've walked around in one.
Okay.
So I guess that this is a much more delicious palette than the Boston palette. Let's put it that way.
That's fair to say. No, and I mean, I absolutely like that. And now, I mean, I'm curious though, like, especially particularly with your job, because again, part of your job is to essentially kind of not be noticed. No one's necessarily going to the movie for the production design. They're seeing the actors and the story and all that kind of thing. But when you're working on something, where does the creative payoff come? Is it just being able to be in a beautiful place like you were here from number 3? Or is it, like you said, the Home Depot where you're going to get a chance to play a little bit?
It's different in every movie, but but what's the same? I mean, that what you're doing in every movie is different, but what's the same in every movie, and the pleasure is, in the beginning, you're thinking about you're trying to service the script, right? And you're trying to create something so that the audience is going to absorb the story the way the the director in particular intends it to be understood and felt. Because my job it's visual, but it's visual in a really visceral way. I mean,
Yeah.
I want you to be in the place that the story unfolds, and so your body is in there, and so the satisfaction is if you can pull that off. The satisfaction, it might be, we go to this place that already has, like, when I first went there, we're walking down the street and it's like, okay, check. It's got like all these things that the script mentioned. The one thing it did that it had that the script doesn't mention is that church that's like 700 tall steps up the hillside to this tiny little church that used to be the church when this town was regularly invaded by everybody. And so the
Right.
people lived really high up. It wasn't until, fairly recently, the last couple of 100 years, that they moved down the hill. They used to have to like go upstairs all the time just to get, so they could be protecting themselves. So that church, and that McCall would see that church and he'd have to get to it. And that became part of the, spelling out his journey to recovery. It was such a fantastic, how do I put this? He's got this, it's a visible goal. Like, once I get there, I'm gonna be fine, right?
Right.
And plus it reflects on the character's spirituality, and indeed Denzel's.
Yeah.
And so that was like a gift. And every other thing in the script was just there, just like, okay, we got that, and you're like, okay, now bring that to the audience and make sure it comes through just the way you want it. So it's a funny thing. I mean, in the case of this movie, you're just trying to make sure that the place itself comes through. It's not it's not world building, it's world embracing and delivering is like more the idea, which is, in a place like this, it's its own pleasure.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. And you guys did that and then some on this film. And I mean, I love that you brought up the church too. It wasn't about Denzel getting his steps in. It was about, really sort of this road to redemption. And it was so gorgeous.
Thank you. Those are the right words. It was the road to the stairway to heaven. It was the road to redemption. It was so graphic. Like, wow, are you kidding me?
Now, I mean, just to put a bow on this, I gotta ask, and this is something I'm always really curious about. Like, ultimately, what got you into this business, particularly this side of the business? Because I mean, there isn't necessarily a quote unquote, production design school. There's always, I'm always curious to see how people get their foot in the door.
Well, I did go to art school as a painter, and then dropped out. And then later, I had a really despicable boyfriend who was making a video about a post-apocalyptic exercise video. And I told him I would do the sets. Exactly. So I did the sets. I had $1,000 and I made a bunch of, post-apocalyptic settings for exercise. And one day, as I was throwing coffee against a fake brick wall in order to make it look old, as somebody had instructed me to do, coffee, not paint, I was like, oh, I can really do this.
Well, of course, as much as this person is a bastard, I now want to see this video for some reason. I'm going to be completely obsessed checking on YouTube. But I mean, last question. How unique is it to be able to stay with someone like Antoine and have a working relationship over the years? Because I mean, again, a lot of times you don't always get sort of that connective tissue when it comes to working relationships, particularly in this business.
You don't, and I have to say that for me, that having that intuitive connection with people, that doesn't happen all the time. And for my relationship with Antoine seems to be quite intuitive. It's almost like, kind of like that. And then sometimes we have very long conversations, but a lot of the times, I know what he's talking about with very few words. And I honestly, I think that we have some sort of connection about feeling some kind of umbilical cord to the dark side. But he's so smart and imaginative and so visual. And when a director is as visual as Antoine is, it really catches fire for me.
Oh, amen to that. But I mean, Naomi, keep up the good work. And honestly, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate this.
It was a pleasure to meet you. Take care.
Likewise. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.